What if I told you that the world you are living in right now, the solid ground beneath your feet, isn't as stable as it seems? Imagine walking through your own house, misstepping and suddenly clipping right through the floor. You don't fall into a basement. You don't transport to a magical realm. You drop into the cosmic junk space hidden right behind our reality, a forgotten labyrinth that human history was never supposed to discover. Millions of people watched A24's The Backrooms or binged the viral clips online, but almost nobody understood the raw, psychological experiment the director was playing on our minds. And the most terrifying part? This isn't a movie about ghosts or demons. This is an exploration of a primal, hardwired fear that sits in the deepest recesses of the human subconscious from the day we are born. A fear that only manifests when you are entirely, truly alone. To unlock the soul of this film, you first have to understand a single, unsettling term: liminal space. Derived from the Latin word for threshold, a liminal space is a transitional route, a place meant to be passed through, never occupied. Think of a vacant shopping mall at night, a deserted school corridor at 3 a.m., or an empty underground parking garage. When these spaces are filled with the white noise of human life, they feel mundane. But strip away the humans, and your brain immediately triggers a panic response. Suddenly you feel an invisible gaze on the back of your neck. Your heart rate spikes. Why? Because the human mind is evolutionary hardwired to expect life in these structures. When that life is completely deleted, the void feels hostile. The Backrooms weaponizes this exact psychological glitch. There are no cheap jump scares here. The terror lies in the absolute mathematical certainty that you are trapped in an endless vacancy, nothing changes, and there is no way out. This brings us to the first layer of the maze, known to the internet as Level 0, the tutorial. The first act of the film traps you entirely within these rotting, monochromatic yellow walls. This environment uses 3 specific environmental triggers to actively destabilize human sanity. First, that sickly, monotone wallpaper, a shade scientifically proven to induce nausea and visual fatigue. Second, the carpet beneath, perpetually damp with a stagnant, foul-smelling moisture that suffocates the atmosphere. And third, the most dangerous element of all, the relentless, high-frequency hum of the overhead fluorescent lights. Psychological studies show that exposing a human to a continuous, unchanging acoustic frequency can trigger sensory deprivation hallucinations within just 48 hours. Your brain, desperate for external data, starts manufacturing sounds and shadows that don't exist. As the protagonist begins his trek through Level 0, he operates under the desperate delusion that the next turn will bring an exit. But this structural void spans over 600 million square miles. It is a non-Euclidean cage where you can walk in a perfectly straight line for days, only to end up exactly where you started. The moment the protagonist breaks under the isolation of Level 0, he accidentally clips through the geometry of the floor, dropping directly into Level 1, the habitable zone. The warm, nauseating yellow instantly vanishes, replaced by cold, gray industrial concrete. It looks like a massive, abandoned corporate warehouse stretching into infinity, flanked by an intricate web of rusted iron pipes and leaking ceilings. Level 1 is structurally distinct because it offers a twisted form of hope. Here, resources occasionally manifest, most notably, a substance known as almond water. In this universe, almond water isn't just sustenance. It's a psychological stabilizer, a chemical anchor keeping your fading sanity attached to reality. The film meticulously documents how a shadowy, bureaucratic research corporation known as ASYNC attempted to colonize this specific level. They ran high-voltage power lines through the concrete, built makeshift outposts, and established fortified bunkers. But Level 1 harbors a terrifying variable: the blackouts. The lights here aren't connected to a grid. They are dictated by the volatile nature of the dimension itself. They shut off instantly without warning, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for weeks. And when total darkness consumes Level 1, the inanimate crates and pipes you trusted during the day begin to shift. The environment becomes so physically unstable that if you switch off your flashlight for a single second, the wall in front of you might disintegrate into a bottomless abyss by the time you turn it back on. If you thought infinite, open spaces were terrifying, the next descent triggers pure, suffocating claustrophobia. Welcome to Level 2, Pipe Dreams. This is the deepest, most oppressive layer of the early Backrooms infrastructure. The corridors contract into tight, industrial veins so narrow an adult cannot even stand fully upright. You are surrounded by an overwhelming labyrinth of massive iron pipes hiss with volatile energy. What flows inside them? No one knows. They violently leak boiling water, toxic steam, and unidentifiable gases, driving the ambient temperature up to an unbearable 120 degrees Celsius. The sound design in this act is a masterclass in psychological tension. The audio track layers the deep, heavy groans of contracting metal, giving you the distinct, terrifying sensation that this entire structure is a living, breathing machine slowly constricting around the protagonist to crush him alive. It is at this exact moment that the protagonist realizes this isn't an abandoned building. It is an autonomous, self-replicating engine expanding across dimensions without an operator. But what was happening behind the scenes to translate this cosmic dread onto the silver screen? This is where the production facts cross into a highly disturbing territory. Hollywood operates on a rigid corporate formula. If you want a blockbuster psychological thriller, you need a multi-million-dollar budget, an army of Oscar-winning VFX artists, and a massive studio lot. But in 2022, a 16-year-old high school student sitting in his bedroom destroyed that entire paradigm. His name was Kane Parsons. When Kane uploaded his first 9-minute short, The Backrooms found footage to YouTube, the visual rendering was so flawless that viewers genuinely believed it was a leaked, top-secret government tape. Horror vanguard James Wan and A24 were so stunned that they bypassed the traditional Hollywood pipeline, immediately contracting a teenage Kane to direct a full-length theatrical feature. But Kane knew that purely digital, green screen effects lacked the weight of physical reality. To capture genuine terror, he convinced A24 to construct a massive physical set in a hidden Los Angeles soundstage. This set wasn't static, it was a mechanical marvel known as the Spinning Labyrinth. For the first time in cinema history, an entire maze of yellow walls was mounted on massive, computerized hydraulic gears. While the actors were sprinting through the corridors, Kane could press a button from the control booth and silently rotate the walls behind them. The result? The actors were genuinely getting lost inside the set during filming. The cold sweat, the frantic breathing, the sheer panic you see on the protagonist's face, that wasn't acting. It was a real psychological reaction to an environment that was physically rewriting itself around them. Furthermore, the sound design team actively weaponized infrasound, sound frequencies dropping below 19 Hz. While these low-frequency vibrations are completely undetectable to the human ear, the human body perceives them as an existential threat. In nature, infrasound is generated by impending earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or severe apex predators. When your brain is subjected to this invisible acoustic pressure for hours, it forces the nervous system into a permanent fight or flight status, causing unexplained nausea, dizziness, and intense paranoia. The director used this to ensure that even when you are looking at a completely empty, stagnant yellow frame, your physical body is reacting with primal fear. Reports even leaked right before the theatrical release stating that 12 minutes of footage had been aggressively cut from the original print. These banned scenes reportedly detailed the spatial dissociation experiments ASYNC conducted on human test subjects, showing that after 30 days of exposure to the backrooms, human cellular biology begins to fuse with the wallpaper, permanently turning limbs into structural drywall while keeping the subject agonizingly alive. But Kane Parsons didn't pull this concept out of thin air. The narrative of the backrooms is anchored to some of the darkest, declassified operations in U.S. history. During the height of the Cold War in the 1960s and 70s, the military-industrial complex funded highly classified programs like Project Stargate and Project Montauk, attempting to map the human consciousness to bend space-time. Massive underground bunker networks stretching for miles still sit abandoned beneath the deserts of New Mexico. Whistleblowers from those legacy projects claimed that researchers accidentally tore open a null dimension, a structural void completely devoid of matter where conventional physics ceased to exist. Kane Parsons synthesized these exact declassified logs to build the corporate lore of ASYNC. What the casual viewer dismisses as internet fiction is actually tethered to a very real, very dark history of government overreach. But the ultimate victims of this anomaly aren't the corporate entities, it's the human minds trapped inside. In the backrooms, a person dies from two variables: the entities or their own psychological decay. When the protagonist enters the yellow void, he isn't just an accidental traveler. He carries the crushing weight of unresolved trauma and intense guilt. Clinical psychology proves that when a human is plunged into absolute, sensory-deprived isolation, the brain undergoes a process called projection. It takes internal psychological wounds and manifests them as external realities. The protagonist constantly hears his old house phone ringing in the distance. He hears the phantom laughter of his deceased daughter echoing through the vents. He flees through the maze, completely blind to the fact that the further he runs, the closer he gets to his own internal demons. The Backrooms is not an external prison. It is a physical manifestation of a fractured mind. This brings us to the true villains of the narrative, not the monsters in the dark, but the cold, calculating scientists of the ASYNC Corporation. Clad in sterile, yellow hazmat suits, their psychology is a textbook definition of a corporate God complex. When they opened the threshold in the 1980s, they truly believed they could colonize infinity. But if you look closely at the lead scientist, Dr. Peter, his motivation isn't scientific altruism. Years prior, a catastrophic error in his calculations resulted in the death of his family. He opened the threshold to warp space, time in a desperate, forbidden attempt to rewrite his own timeline. The entire multi-billion-dollar enterprise is built on the profound grief and guilt of a single broken man. They think they own the maze, but they are just rats who built their own cage. And what about the entities hunting them? The bacteria or wire organisms aren't aliens or demons. When an object or a human clips from our reality into the backrooms, the ambient consciousness of the dimension attempts to process and replicate that matter. The entities are a grotesque, corrupted fusion of old computer wiring, structural insulation, and the skeletal remains of the human travelers who died there decades ago. Symbolically, the entity is the physical manifestation of the protagonist's trauma. Notice how it rarely attacks instantly, it chases from a distance, emitting a distorted, mechanical scream. The audio frequency is identical to the sound of the car crash that tore the protagonist's life apart. In a pivotal scene, the protagonist encounters another human, an ASYNC researcher missing for years. But as they converse, the researcher's eyes remain completely dead, his neck tilting at an impossible angle. This is a terrifying execution of the uncanny valley. Look at his hands, the fingers lack human joints. He isn't human. He is a mimic, a biological trap generated by the backrooms to harvest the remaining fragments of the protagonist's mind. If you analyze the frames with surgical precision, the director's hidden codes become blindingly clear. In the 47th minute, as the protagonist walks past a torn section of level 0 wallpaper, look into the dark crevice behind him. There is no insulation or wooden framing. There is a sleek, modern surveillance camera with a pulsing red LED. The protagonist was never alone. From the very first second, ASYNC technicians were sitting in a sterile control room, treating his psychological torture as a raw dataset. This ties directly into the film's brilliant use of color theory. The specific hue of the walls is anxiety yellow, a monochromatic wavelength proven to spike cortisol production in the human brain, causing immediate cognitive degradation. Notice how the color shifts as the protagonist's mind unravels. By the 55th minute, the warm yellow subtly decays into a sickly, gangrenous greenish-brown. The set didn't change. The director altered the camera's color filter to show that the environment was rotting in direct synchronicity with the protagonist's sanity. Even the background hum hides a dark secret. When the audio track is reversed and slowed down by 40%, the mechanical buzz dissolves into the layered, distorted audio logs of dying ASYNC personnel warning, "Don't stop here, this place is changing us." Even the cinematography tells a story. The frantic, shaky VHS camera represents human agency, but the moment the protagonist collapses from exhaustion, the camera detaches, floating into a cold, clinical, omniscient wide angle. The backrooms itself has taken control of the lens. This brings us to the theories that completely recontextualize the entire film. The first, the dying hallucination theory, suggests the protagonist never entered an alternate dimension. The car crash in the opening minutes was fatal, and the endless yellow walls are just the final, frantic hallucinations of a brain starved of oxygen in a comatose state. The fluorescent lights are the ICU lamps. The entity is death coming to claim him. The second, more cosmic theory is the living organism theory. The backrooms isn't a place. It is a colossal, sentient, biological entity that feeds on alternate dimensions. The walls are its skin, the pipes are its circulatory system, and the hum is its neural activity. Humans are a virus that infected its body via the threshold, and the bacteria entities are simply its white blood cells, hunting down the infection. But the most devastating theory addresses the third act, where the protagonist seemingly escapes back to his suburban home. Look closely at the sky outside his window. There is no sun, only a massive concrete ceiling painted blue, with the paint visibly chipping away. He never escaped. He merely ascended to level 11, the false city. The backrooms generated a simulated reality from his stolen memories to keep his brain active and compliant while it feeds on his consciousness. This narrative is a mirror to our own modern existence. The endless, empty corridors of level 0 are a direct metaphor for the infinite scroll of modern social media. We swipe down day after day, wandering through an endless loop of digital content, hunting for an exit, completely blind to the fact that the vacancy of the space remains unchanged. We are living in a synthetic reality, where AI, algorithms, and deepfakes make it impossible to discern what is real from what is a simulation. Our sprawling concrete cities, our identical apartment complexes, our empty corporate cubicles. These are the liminal spaces of the real world. The climax of the film offers no triumphant resolution. The protagonist reaches a colossal concrete vault emitting a blinding white light. He steps through, finding himself in his living room. But when he reaches out to touch his wife, his hand passes cleanly through her projection as the sky outside fractures into raw pixels. The director leaves us trapped in the architecture of confusion. It forces us to ask a terrifying question. Can we ever truly escape the systems that capture us? Is our society, our reality, just another layer of a grander simulation? This 2-hour journey was never just a movie breakdown. It was a doorway opened by ASYNC, and by watching it to the very end, you have crossed the threshold. Now tell me, was the exit real? Did the protagonist ever truly make it home? Or was the audience the true casualty of this psychological manipulation? Look around your room right now. Examine the 4 walls enclosing you. Can you say, with absolute mathematical certainty, that you are still in the real world? Or did you slip out of reality while staring into this screen? If you can see the hidden exit behind the illusion, comment only one word below. Keep the secret safe for those still trapped inside. Let's see how many of you can actually break the simulation. Visual, sharp cut to total black. A single neon yellow line flashes once, accompanied by a heavy mechanical audio hum, then total silence.